Hello everyone, and welcome to our second ever Jerry's Live Workshops. My name is Michaela Wester and I will be your instructor this evening. Now this is an in-depth class where we'll be going over mixing with colored pencils. Now this is one of my favorite mediums. I love working with these and I have a lot of tips. I'm not going to be using everything that I've learned over the years, but I will try to put tips and tricks here and there as I'm working along. If you have any questions at all, please pop that in the chat and my lovely moderator Amanda will ask that while I'm working live. And if you are watching later and you have questions later, you can pop it in the comments under the video and we'll be sure to answer those later on at the earliest convenience. And then of course, if you're curious about anything that I'm using tonight, we do have a teacher's cart. It's going to be a code JLW for Jerry's Live Workshops, and this is number 2, so JLW2. You pop that in the search bar on the JerrysArtarama website, and it will show everything that I'm using. But I'm going to go ahead and jump right on in. I'm going to try and complete this entire colored pencil drawing by the end of the class today. So this is what I'm going to be working on. I really enjoy this idea of combining like old sculpture with newer graffiti and then kind of making the sculptures feel a little bit more lifelike by adding pieces of like modern jewelry or like clothing. So I do have a piece in the background that kind of inspired this one as kind of like a diptych. But for getting started, this reference image I created on Photoshop. I'm not super well versed in the Photoshop realm. But you don't need to be when you're creating reference photos. So I found a really cool sculpture reference photo as well as a graffiti reference photo, and I kind of made my own reference for this drawing today. I believe, Amanda, do you have this image available for people? If not, I will post it later for you guys to access. But I'm going to jump right on in. So I'm using Cezanne colored pencil paper pad. It's always fun to say. And I've already transferred my image onto my paper. Now what I'm using is this Seural transfer paper in blue. Now this is kind of like a pastel-y transfer. So this will transfer in a blue. I don't like using the graphite color because I don't want my colors to get muddy. The white doesn't show up. I'm not huge on yellow and red, and I'm using a lot of blues in this drawing, so that's why I went for the blue in this one. Now, another tip when I'm transferring my image, I use this glass dip pen to transfer all of my images. Now, of course, there's this really nice, sharp point on the end here. I don't use this when I'm transferring for a colored pencil drawing because I use this for another technique when it comes to working with this medium. Now, if you indent the paper, it will kind of create like a resist. So the colored pencil will glide over that and leave the white of the paper or whatever color paper you're using. So I don't use this sharp point to transfer my colored pencil drawings. I actually use the back end of this same pen to transfer it on here. That way I'm not creating indentations in my paper that's going to cause issues when I'm coloring. But I've already transferred that. I basically line up my image with my taped edges, as well as cutting a sheet that's roughly the same size as the paper. So underneath here, you can kind of see my light transfer. I'm going to take this off completely now that I no longer need it. And now I'm completely ready to go. Now to start off, I like to kind of figure out where the shapes and forms are before I get into the nitty and gritty. So I like starting with a base color for most of the things. Now I have my reference photo here that I'm going to be working with, and she's kind of this coppery green, and it has some of that copper up in her hair there. So I'm going to start by laying down all of this green over her entire body, avoiding the snow and where there's brown, and just start layering some colors down. I've already selected my colors for this project. I'm using the set 120 for the Cezanne colored pencils. Starting off, if you're following along, I'm going to start by using this nice teal color, number 92. And like I said, I'm just going to start filling in anywhere I see that teal color. I'm not going to be too careful, but I am laying this down really lightly. I want to make sure that I can still see my drawing as I go as well. So I'm going to be careful with my line work as I lay this down. Now, the reason I'm not being super careful with how I lay down this first layer is because I'm going to blend all of these first colors with solvent so that it kind of turns into this really nice soft drawing, and then I'll go in with my details. But since I'm blending, I'm not too worried about the line work. Typically, when you're working with colored pencil, every mark you make and every line that you make is going to matter. Now, of course, I'm still keeping that in mind. I'm not getting crazy with all my directions. And I want things to be as even as possible as I work around it. So since I have a really dark edge here compared to everything else, I might just add a little bit more along that edge so it doesn't look like a weird, unwanted shape. And then I'll darken everything to kind of match that. Now again, this is going to blend into a darker teal that I want, so I'm working with really light layers. I'm putting down this color and I'm barely putting pressure on my pencil as I go. And I'm skipping around my lines again, just so I know what I'm working with. Now there's going to be multiple different ways of blending. I'm going to go over a few of them and utilize those in this piece. And if you have questions about ones that I don't mention, please feel free to pop those in the chat. Oh, and if you are a colored pencil artist already, please share that with us in the chat. I want to see who is either following along or is already well versed in the colored pencil world. Now, here I've come into an issue where I have the pinky coming across the forehead, and it's all the same color right now. I'm leaving a space where the line work is. But looking at this reference, the teal in the pinky is a lot lighter than the teal on the forehead. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that is a little bit darker. It's going to allow me to visualize that separation and get me ready for the difference in value there. I like holding my pencil at like a really sharp angle here. Was that like 45 degrees? And I put very little pressure on this first layer. And I adjust that when it comes to value. If I see something that's like starkly different, like how this gets really dark up here, I might start adding value lightly as I go, but I'm not too worried about it at this stage. Just trying to get this color everywhere it needs to go. Now underneath her chin here, it is really dark and it is teal. I'm not going to fill that in though with this color. I have another colored pencil color in mind. So I'm just going to kind of loosely add it in here. And then I'll keep moving on and I'll come back to that with another colored pencil. But I'm going to add this color everywhere it needs to go until I'm done with it, and then I'll switch to another color. This helps you make sure that you get this color throughout your work. Even in the later steps, if you are working with a color, you might as well put it everywhere it needs to go, and then if you need it later, grab it again. But then that way it allows your eye to connect with wherever it is around the drawing, and it keeps your eye moving. And then on the face, this is also kind of a difficult area. This is definitely be where I avoid those dark areas. I'm gonna add that with a different color, but this is definitely, I'm gonna push the value with this one pencil so I can tell the difference between one shape and another. So even like this shadow on the bridge of her nose, I wanna mark that. I know this whole triangle shape on the side is gonna be super dark. I don't need to put that in with teal right away, but I do want to make sure that I know what's happening. So this gets really dark. I'm not going to fill it fully in. But I'm going to work along the angles here, and then I'll just fill it in with a nice quick layer. Again, it gets really dark next to the deep shadow here. I'm going to make sure I block that in. And then I'll just lightly fill this in so I can move into my darker color. All right, I think that's good enough for getting started with this color. Do we have a question?
We do. We had a couple people that were saying that when they sharpen their pencils, they feel like there's a lot of waste. Do you have any tips for that?
Absolutely. So when it comes to sharpening my pencils, I do a couple different things. If I'm trying to do something quick, I have this ellipse sharpener. I can usually control how much I take off with this, but even then, any sharpener, I would never recommend an electric sharpener when it comes to colored pencils. That is definitely, you're wasting half of your pencil when you use one of those. This you can control a little bit more because it's handheld and you control how many turns you're getting. But even more control, I am using a blade. So this is an accurate blade. I'll just show you real quick because I was sharpening a pencil earlier. This guy. So I will hold my pencil and kind of cradle it in my finger here, and then I will hold the blade in the other hand, and I will kind of line it up along the edge where I want to start carving away, and then I'll use this thumb to push my other thumb to guide it up. I don't want to get the shavings on my drawing here. And I'll guide it up so I can create the perfect point. That way you're controlling how much pencil you're getting rid of and how much wood you're exposing. I find this to be the best method. You can really have as much control over this as you need. And this was always my preferred way of sharpening my pencils. I hope that helps. Now this is the pencil I'm going to be using next. You can tell I've used this a lot because I have a pencil extender on this guy. If you're not familiar with these, this is the length of my pencil now. This is the original length of a pencil. I've used this one a great deal. But these come in handy if you're really using your pencils a lot and you're loving them. What you're gonna do is you're gonna slide this little ring down. It goes up and down. You slide it all the way down, pop it in, and when you slide it back up, it's going to tighten these so it holds it in place. And you have a little bit more workability with this pencil, even though it's gotten pretty short. And then of course I have some drafting brushes. I have a Da Vinci brush as well as some accurate brushes. I love this for just keeping my space clean, especially if I'm like shaving off my pencils or if I'm dusting off any pigment while I'm working. That way I don't have to get my oils from my fingers on my paper. But this next pencil is going to be 095. It's a really nice deep teal. I use this for almost all of the shadows in this drawing. Now, of course, I'm not going to use only this color because it adds more depth if you're layering your colors. But I thought blending or having a base of this color for my shadows was really useful and very pretty. So I'm going to start going into those really, really dark areas and blocking them in with this color. Now, since this is a dark color, your lines are going to be more noticeable. So I'm going to be a little bit more cognizant of what I'm doing with this color. I feel like it always looks pretty in a colored pencil drawing when all the line work is going in the exact same angle. I don't know if I have the patience for that all of the time, but I do think it's really beautiful when that happens. So I'm just finding those really dark pockets of shadow and filling them in. Now there's a few ways of putting down colored pencil that I like to do. Either, like I said, sketching always at the same angle all the way through. I like doing like little circles or ovals. I think that creates a really nice soft layer of color. And sometimes I get really focused when I get into these small details. It's the small details that I feel like really bring a drawing together. So I don't like to rush through them. Like, I know I said that this is like the underdrawing or the base layer of colors, but the more precision you put in your work while you create a piece, it's definitely going to show through. I know I already have some darkness in here. Might start popping in some of those shadows. I really like these tiny little shadows that the snow makes. And what I do is I just make really tiny scribbly circles right along the line of the snow to make that shadow pop out. And I'm avoiding the snow because I'm really going to utilize the color of this paper for that step. You can use different colored paper when it comes to working with colored pencil. I think it's really lovely. It's very similar to how when you use a toned piece of paper for your pastel, it can create really nice tones and moods. I considered that for this piece actually. However, I really like the idea of just leaving negative space for the snow, just leaving the paper as it is and adding subtle values and colors to pop in there. So I'm definitely taking advantage of that for this piece. And I'm constantly moving my eye. I don't want to keep my eyes on what I'm doing entirely. I mean, of course I do, because I want to know what I'm doing, but I'm always looking back and forth. I'm not keeping my eye on the reference photo or the drawing too long. That's definitely going to help me create more of a similar drawing to my reference photo, because I'm constantly comparing it with almost everything that I place down on the paper. And then it gets a little bit darker over here. Now this pinky is so strange because it looks so different from everything else on her. It just has like this really dark, it looks like it's peeling away, or maybe it just wasn't touched by the elements, but it's very strange. So I'm going to layer the first two colors I had to kind of get that weird shape blocked in there. And there's a really dark spot at the end of the pinky, right at the knuckle. So I'm gonna put that in there while I have this color. There's some shadow to the hand here that goes all the way down. Now another fun thing is, even though I'm trying to imitate this reference photo I created, the best part about art is you don't have to copy your reference photo. If there's something that you notice and you're like, man, I wish it didn't look like that, or I wish it was a different color, that's the best part about art, is you can change it. You can kind of adjust it, which I'm probably going to do with her hand here. I feel like her hand kind of blends into the shadow under her neck. So I'm going to darken this shadow under here and then either change the temperature and value along here to create some separation, maybe a little bit of both. But I take notes of that as I'm working. If I notice anything new, I'll keep in mind that for a later step. Now this is pretty dark under here. Usually when I'm layering colors, I don't like to press down to get my dark colors. I'll slowly layer it. Sometimes I'll cross hatch to get a darker value right off the bat. That's something that I do sometimes. The knuckle on the pinky here is a little bit darker than I had. The shadow kind of goes up the center of the finger. Then if I ever lose my drawing, sometimes I'll go back in because I know this is going to get really dark here. And I'll create more of an outline and bring back my sketch just so that I know what I'm looking at. All right, now this eye is kind of weird because you can't really see what's happening in there. There's very subtle shadows that create a face. So I'm definitely pushing that. This little oval here under the bridge of her eyebrow gets really dark. And then it slowly gets lighter as it goes up to the temple. So those subtle variations of value can be really important. It gets really dark under the hair here. Kind of falls under the temple. And then it gets kind of dark into this little teardrop shape here. But then it fades out to a lighter value under the eye. So I'm trying to keep in mind all of these subtle shifts in value to make sure I'm maintaining some form of a face. And the nose on the sculpture is so funny. It makes me think of Squidward. She definitely has like a little Squidward nose. But I think it's just the shadows are doing her a misjustice here. And this is also a kind of tricky spot under the nose where the chin kind of hits the shadow under the chin. It kind of blends together. So I can kind of decide one of two things. I can either create a very obvious separation where maybe underneath the neck is going to be the darker of the two, or I can really push it and just blend that together. We have another question?
Yes. I don't know how to say the username.
Okay.
But I'm going to guess her name is Britt. Said, going back to a point from earlier, would you intentionally deboss areas or lines to keep them white when beginning to build layers?
Deboss areas. I guess I don't know what deboss.
Like when you have like a groove when you push too
Yeah.
And then if you color over them lightly, it wouldn't go into that. So would you intentionally do that when you're starting?
If you add that on accident and you want to get rid of it, you can definitely do that with the back end of the dip pen, I think, since it's a little bit curved. If you kind of like rub across a debossed line, it might kind of even it out a little bit. I have worked on pieces that have lines that I don't like. I will usually sharpen my pencil to a really fine point and kind of stipple into that groove that I made to kind of disappear. You can also use an eraser on like the raised edges where it picks up more pigment than in the groove and kind of help it disappear. I don't know if that answers your question. I hope it does. Please share if you need further details with Amanda.
We'll check back in.
Sure. All right, I want to try and get this whole area in shadow. Maybe I'll just do a nice thin layer of this over the entire cheek here. Here we go. Now I can go in and add those subtle shadows like I said. It gets kind of light next to the nose here. And then it gets kind of dark down here, like it's got that, what is that? Your cheekbone? Yeah. That line for your cheekbone, I feel like it's very subtly coming out here, and then it connects to, I'm assuming, where her mouth starts under her nose. So even though I don't fully know what's happening, I can kind of make sense as I work. And then this little shadow kind of connects over the bridge of her nose. I want to make sure I add that in there. Then maybe I'll darken this shadow, because this is one of the darkest shadows, I believe, on her face. I do feel like she needs a name, so if you're watching and you're like, she's definitely a Norma or something, please share that. I need some name ideas. All right, and then I'm gonna start getting into her hair. Now she's got some really wavy hair in here, and again, that's where the shadows kind of get a little confusing. So I'm gonna try and make sense of these. Get those squiggles in the right place. And this gets kind of dark down here, but I still want to make sense of this. So I'm going to bring out that line under her hair squiggle. And then under here, kind of lost my line. I'm going to try and bring it back. Got a really nice deep shadow for one of her hair curls here. There we go. And then this is mostly all dark. Now, one of the things I can do while I'm doing this, I could go in and fully add like a nice medium value of this dark color. And then I can pull back if I wanted to. So that's one of the things I really like to do with colored pencil. And my favorite tool for that is going to be this electric accurate eraser. It's got different sized eraser tips. So this one I have a really small one. They have one that's a little bit bigger than this, but I love the size of this for this project. I'm gonna pull it out just a little bit because it's gotten kind of nubby. So I'm gonna take that gray piece right off the top that holds the eraser. Gonna kind of give myself a little bit more eraser to work with. And I just pop that right back in. Now, when you're using this and you're kind of getting something more white or like a lighter color area, please clean your eraser before you go in because it can pick up pigment and then lay it back down. So usually before I use it, I'll erase on my tape border or like on the table. I don't want to do it too much because that can just waste your eraser away. So please be careful with that. I do want to bring out a little bit of something in here. I kind of lost something there. And then with the nose, I lost my value shift a little bit. So I can push and pull this way. I absolutely love working with this electric eraser. It picks up a lot more pigment than other erasers, and since it has such a fine point, I can get some really precision erasing done. Let me get back into this really dark shadow under here. Bring out that cheek again. I do think I'm going to keep under the chin darker than the face. This is going to have to be the same value at some point, but maybe it doesn't go all the way down to the chin. And I really like this edge of her eyebrow here. I really like those. I don't know what's going on there. It's like scuff marks, but they're in perfect little parallel columns. And I just think it's so interesting. I'm gonna do more of those little squiggles along the bottom edge here because it looks like it's a little chipped maybe. There's a little bit of a dark spot here. It's always good to keep your pencil moving even if you don't fully know what you're doing next, especially if you're working faster like I'm trying to right now. I just want to get everything laid out so I can blend it together and get those details. Did we have anyone following along? I'm always curious how many people follow along. And if you are following along, am I going too fast? I can't really slow down, but you can definitely you can definitely go back through and watch again.
I think we have people watching mostly.
Okay.
And then we have a viewer that was working on a watercolor but watching while working on something else,
Oh,
which
I
I
love
liked.
that. Now we like to say that if you're following along, share it and post it and then tag us. If you're just working on art, I'm actually very curious. So if you want to share what you're working on, go ahead and tag us in the class code for today, which is JLW2. Hashtag JLW2. All right, I think I'm just going to kind of loosely fill this in. Make sure I get that dark edge for the arm so I know where that is. It gets really dark over here. Now I don't fully know what's happening here. Usually I kind of try to make sense of it. I think this is like the sleeve of her shirt and then it got coated in snow. So I find this little sliver of teal here to be really important to kind of show why it's so dark there. So I'm gonna actually go back to that teal and block in that little sliver with my really tiny circly scribbles that I was talking about. And then I'll go around it with that dark teal to block out that really dark shadow that's going on over here. And there is some snow speckled in through this area, so I can either ignore that it's there or leave little white spots. A good tip for if you are trying to leave purposely like stark white areas. I know it's technically a watercolor tool, but it works perfectly for the same thing, using masking fluid. So you can mask out anywhere you want super white areas, start working on your drawing. That way, even if you're like blending things or rubbing your arm or hand against the paper, you're not going to get that slight value in those areas. It's protected. And then once you're ready to kind of figure out what's happening in those really light areas, you can remove that masking fluid and kind of blend it into your drawing. All right, and then she's got like a weird kind of stark shadow line along her arm here. Maybe that's where the arm bone was meant to be, creating a shadow. I'll get a little bit of this shadow detail in the hand, and then I'm going to switch to another color here. She has a little bit of a dark shadow along the edge of her hand, which I love because it creates a really nice separation between the hand and the snow. But I can really just draw a line along that edge, and that works perfectly. Oh, I forgot to do her hair. Let me pop in some of the hair on this side. I'm just doing my long ovals for this part. I keep switching up the way I'm working when it comes to standing. I don't usually stand. I do have a chair. Maybe I should use my chair. I have a question.
Yeah, we were wondering if you ever use erasers with grit in them for colored pencils. Britt was saying she has some Tombow erasers that are rougher than a regular eraser might be.
I don't, mostly just because I'm afraid of how it might affect my paper. I mean, you definitely can. I am not partial to them, just because I haven't put in a lot of use when it comes to those. But I'm just very aware of, I like a soft eraser. That's just me. But yeah, what was that? Was that the question? Mm-hmm. I'm definitely gonna have to play with them a little bit more so that I can be a little bit more knowledgeable on that for you guys. All right, I'm just gonna fill this in mostly with this dark color up here, and I'll add in those nice bronzy brown colors later. Can't forget this part of her down here. All right, I'm gonna add just a touch more teal where I forgot it over on her chest here. And then I'm gonna go into some greens. I really enjoy those kind of punchy lime green areas. So I have these two colors, which is number 98 and 63. I'm gonna start with 63. And again, I'm just gonna loosely block in where I see this teal lean a little bit closer to a green. And since this is light and I'm going on top of a darker layer here, I really don't need to be super careful with my line work. I'm just going in with my long ovals as I block this in. It looks really light. Are you guys able to see this color?
We're gonna try to.
Okay. I really like it up in the hair. Now this is another area where I'm like, I really enjoy this color, but it's only really in this part up here. So I think I'm gonna add more of it down here. So it allows your eye to jump from the top down here to the bottom. I might even add it more down here on her arm again, so that it's in more than just that one area. I can't really put it in this dark section, though I kind of want to. I might just put a little bit on her cheek to make myself happy. And then maybe a little bit down here. Now, this other color I had is a little bit more of an in-between. So wherever I see it go, more of a, like less of a punchy green, more of like a in-between. So this area right on her finger here, I felt like was the perfect area for this color. And I'm gonna let that kind of go all over the drawing. I really like it on her forehead here, even in her hair a little bit. I might lightly add it to the side of her eyebrow. Definitely in her hands. Get that little shadow on her finger there. And let it go up further into that finger. And then I'll probably create more of a separation. Now there's two fingers here, even though it looks like one. I'm gonna try and create that separation with this color. And then those indentations on the back of her hand, I want to bring those out with this color as well. Create a little bit of a in-between blend for these colors down here. And then I'll probably bring it along this shadow line to give it a little bit more interest. And then same with down here. Needs a little bit more of a oomph. Now I'm gonna do one more color for this blue-green area, then I'll do the browns, and I'm gonna start blending some things together. I have a couple of blending options. Now there's some areas that lean a little bit more like cyan, a little bit more blue. So I'm gonna use this color here, this is number 61, for those areas, mostly in these bright areas. It's gonna lean a little bit more of a blue. A little bit on her nose. Down here on the base of her arm gets kind of a little too blue. And then the shadow right where it hits the edge, where it gets to that really nice green I added in, I want to add a little bit more of this blue into the shadow. All right, I think that's good. I did notice I have a bit of a shadow missing around the pinky here, so let me bring that out. Okay, that feels better. I might add a little bit of a shadow underneath the jewelry I added because that doesn't exist in my reference photo, but I do want them to feel like they're a part of the drawing. So while I have this in my hand, I'm going to add just a touch of a shadow underneath there. All right. I'm going to go ahead and go into my browns. I'm going to start with these two here. So this is going to be number 83 and 88. Starting with this more yellow one, 88. I'm going to do the same thing I did with that lime green and just lightly pop that in wherever I feel like that brown is coming through. And again, I can add it in areas it doesn't exist in case I want to add a little bit more interest in an area. I really like the color it makes when this color mixes with that lime green. And this is another color I can use to separate these two fingers back here. Get this in her hair. I do need to sharpen it up a bit, so I'm gonna do that real quick. Again, I'm using one thumb to guide the other as I sharpen this. And I'm picking up the blade as I get to the end so that I can reveal more of the colored pencil and just get rid of the wood. Sometimes I'll sharpen it this way and then I'll have a bunch of just the colored pencil lead showing. Then I'll put it into a pencil sharpener to get just the lead to a point if I'm too lazy to do that with my X-Acto blade. Let me clean that up. I have my, put it on the floor last time, put it in the trash. Let me finish adding this really nice kind of yellow ochre color to her hair. Also, when this color mixes with that really dark teal I put up there, it creates a really nice brown. I'm going to be adding more of a darker brown to this area, but anywhere I have a shadow up here that I added with that dark teal, I love that it creates like a warm shadow once I put this color over top. And I don't know what this is on her finger here. It looks like another random finger coming out. I don't know what it is, but I put it in there. It's just a little nubbin. Maybe it's part of her hair. Not sure, but it's there. And since it's only up here on her head, again, I'm going to allow this color to kind of naturally lay somewhere else. I feel like it needs to go down here a little bit. And once I stare at my image, anywhere I can very slightly notice a yellow color anywhere else in my drawing, I'm going to put it there. Even if it's not technically this color, I just really like how it makes the eye move throughout your drawing when you create kind of like a triangle with your color placement. And again, I really like this shadow line where it goes from dark to light, so I really want to add interest there. I'm adding quite a few colors to this area. And then again, looking at this, I get this slightest, tiniest hint of like yellow green in this area. You probably can't even tell on camera, but because I'm noticing just a slight difference and it's slightly more yellow, I'm going to pop this color in that area. And it's just light enough that it's not like creating a crazy color change, but it's just enough to create a little bit of a, oh yeah, your eyes kind of shift around to match that color. Now there is a little bit of this color in the snow as well. I'm probably just going to pop it in a couple areas. And since it's white, it's snow, I'm barely putting this color down. And another thing that I'm going to show you, I'm going to be showing you 3 different ways of blending. And that's going to help me create separation between my 3 different either figures or items within my drawing. So I have my background, my foreground, which is my beautiful statue lady here, and my snow. So I'm doing those 3 different blending methods on those 3 different parts of the piece to kind of create a separation between all 3. Now I think that's good with this kind of yellow ochre color. I'm going to go in with this more burnt sienna color and deepen some of those areas. I'm going to be a little bit more purposeful with this color because it is darker. Those lines are going to be a little bit more apparent. I can also use this to bring out those forms again that I might have lost. And it gets really dark over here, so I'm just going to color this all in. Same with this random nubbin coming out between the fingers. And this area of the hair is also really interesting because the grooves are still this coppery color, and then the raised areas of the hair have kind of turned into the, is it like a copper patina? Is that what the green is? Okay. It's gotten like that really gorgeous patina going on in there. Again, I'm going to let this kind of find other areas to live within the drawing. Now I know it's going to go into the watch. I'm not going to worry about that quite yet, but maybe I'll add it into the shadows down here, just a touch. And then maybe I'll blend it into this part of her arm, because it does get kind of like a gray color. So the more colors I blend into this area, the more gray it's going to get. So now I've gotten to a point where I can start my first layer of blending. So this is going to be like my underpainting. Now I can blend my underpainting together. And for that, I'm going to be using Studio Solve and a cotton bud. Now one more thing I'm going to be using, because I'm still working within my colored pencil pad, I have a nice sheet of acetate here. It's going to protect the paper underneath. I also use this on top once I get to those final layers. That way my hand isn't sitting on top of any other colored pencil area, and I'm not getting that on areas I don't want. So I'm just soaking the cotton bud in the mineral spirits here, and I'm going to start on those light areas first. Now, it's going to soak into the paper, but it's not going to blend until you blend those pigments together. So starting in the light areas, I'm going to make really small circles, follow along my color shapes that I've created to blend my colors together. I'm going to avoid those dark shadows for last. I just want to get my light colors to blend together. Now the direction that you're coloring this in is going to matter. Because as you're rubbing into these little circles, it's going to be moving that pigment around. So you want to be very purposeful with how you do this. Now another fun thing about this is you can kind of see right here maybe that it's bled beyond my lines. The best part is, yes, it's going to bleed beyond my lines, but it's not going to take any pigment with it. It's going to dry and it's going to go back to white. So don't be too worried about that. But this is definitely a process that will turn out better if you take your time. So I'm just slowly filling in and blending these shapes together. Again, I'm avoiding those really dark areas so I can make the most of this one cotton bud. I'm gonna jump down here. This is that area I added a bunch of colors. I can now see what color it's turning into, and I can adjust it with my final layer. And you can see it's getting really soft and like fluffy as I go. It's removing those lines I created while I was drawing. Not completely, but just enough where I'm creating a really nice underpainting to work with. And while you're doing this, I'm just gonna keep going until I feel like it's not blending anymore. And that's when I'm grabbing a little bit more solvent. I have this light area here. And if I do have really distinctive lines as I'm going, I can go in the opposite direction to help blend those away. And you can kind of see I got a little bit of a dark blue on my cotton pad here, and it transferred there. I'm not too worried about it. This is the underdrawing. That is a light area, but I can always disguise it with my future layers. Or I can kind of blend it into the shadow next to it. I'm not too worried. I can hide it if I feel like it's an issue. All right, now I'm getting into those dark areas. And it's a technique like this that I love my taped edges because I don't need to worry about a crispy edge. I already have tape down. Once I peel it up, I'll have a really nice crispy corner there, which I love. Going into those darker shadows. Didn't get quite dark enough in this area, but like I said, it's an underpainting. Not too worried about it. I'll add that later. Gotta remember where I decided to keep those little snow areas. And then once I'm done, as you saw, the color still transfers a little bit. So I can go back into where the snow is, and maybe I can add some shadows with what's left over on my cotton bud. I like to use one for as long as I can. You have a question?
Yes. Cheryl is wondering what you can use besides solvents or other chemicals if per se you get migraines. If there's anything you can do the same thing with.
No, that's a great question. And you're either gonna love or gonna hate the answer. So my alternative is going to be water-soluble colored pencils. It's gonna do the same thing. You're not using solvent. They already exist. They're pretty great, actually. And the workability is actually a little bit easier than solvent. So if solvent is an issue for you, there is going to be a great alternative. So that is a great question.
And would it be okay to substitute with Gamsol? Is that?
What is Gamsol? Is that a mineral spirit?
I believe it's an odorless mineral.
Then yeah.
Spirit. Okay.
Sorry, I'm not well versed in everything.
All the different brands.
I try to be, but
there's a lot.
Yes. Let me get these hair squiggles in. I did switch to a new cotton bud, so I'm not worried about switching back over to a light area. All right, got a couple more areas of this blending. I'm gonna put a few layers of my snow shadows, and then we're gonna take a quick 5-minute break. So just a couple more steps, and then we can take a bathroom break or a water break, snack break, pick your nose, whatever you need to do. All right. Let me lay down a couple areas of my snow. And I love the colors I picked out for this in particular because I just think it's so fun. I have a pink and a purple. So I have number 105 and 112. I just like that these feel like the opposites of her figure. So I have the pink to oppose the green and a purple to oppose this like yellow ochre color. And it already feels like they naturally pop into the snow already. So it just felt like a perfect selection there. I'm basically covering everything in pink. Just a light wash of pink. And then I'll block in the shadows with my purple. Now with this step, I am being careful to avoid those areas where the solvent has seeped out a little bit because you can soak, maybe not soak your paper, but like add solvent first and then go on top with colored pencil to get more of a deep color. So that is an option. Since I'm trying to stay kind of light with this area, I'm going to avoid that for now. In those areas I popped in a little bit of that yellow ochre, I'll get a really nice, gorgeous orange slightly peeking through there. And I always forget the snow on her head, so let me make sure I don't forget that. And anywhere I want to be like stark white, like on her shoulder on the right and the top of her head, I'm not going to put any color there because I really want that to stick out as bright white. All right, let me block in a few shadows and then we'll go to our break. You have a question?
Yes.
What do you got?
Sorry, my mic wouldn't turn on. Cheryl was wondering, since you brought up watercolor pencils, if you had any tips for stabilizing them once you're done with your piece. Finishing your piece with watercolor pencils, basically.
I would definitely use some sort of fixative. I have here. I have a workable fixative from Krylon that can definitely be in between layers. You could finish with this if you wanted. I would recommend the Krylon Fine Art Fixative as your final layer. That'll work with just about most of your drawing media. So definitely holding it in place with a fixative would be my go-to. Now for the snow, I do want to be slightly more purposeful with my line work because I'm going to do more of a soft blend for the snow. And I'll show you what that is after our break. But in the meantime, I'm being a little bit more controlled and soft with how I'm laying this down. Now from here up is almost completely purple, so I'm going to start laying that in slowly as well. Do we have another question or? Okay. All right. I do have one more color for this area, and that's only because this purple blends into like a deep periwinkle that blends into that deep turquoise shadow. So that little area right here, I'm going to go in with more of a like a warm blue. But let me block in the rest of these shadows. Now this side, the shadow is kind of green. I'm going to stick with the purple, I think, because I don't want it to blend into her. Just get this blocked in a touch. Make sure I don't forget the head, because I definitely forgot the head again. All right, let me get that blue shadow in, and then we'll go to break. Now this is something I like to build up because it's a really subtle transition. So I want to make sure on the left it blends seamlessly into that purple, and then on the right it blends seamlessly into that deep turquoise. So that's a very small area to get a really soft transition. I'm going in with some cross hatching. Doesn't go all the way across, so I can keep it light on one side. And then it goes further down here. Oh, and this color, I'm so sorry. If you're following along, 103. I'll add that in this shadow over here, since we're not doing the green. All right. And I think that's good for our break point. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. I'm going to drink some water, and then we'll come right on back. So now's your time to go to use the restroom or whatever it is you need to do, but we'll see you in 5. All right, and we're back. All right, so I'm gonna jump right back in. There was something I noticed that I forgot. There's a couple shadows I didn't put in there. I'm gonna put those in real quick, and then we're gonna jump into the details. Like I said, this is more of an underpainting. I'm going to adjust things and bring out those really nice details in this next step. So let me add in that shadow I missed right underneath the snow over here. Gonna add that in, and then I'm going to blend it real quick with the solvent so that it matches. Now this is going to be the point where I want my pencils to be a little bit sharper. This is probably going to be where I utilize that sharpener so I can kind of jump between things quickly. But let's go ahead and focus just on her for now and bring out those details. I'm going to start with my super darks. So I have another dark blue here. It's going to be number 28. I'm going to give it a quick sharpen. Make sure it's empty. I love this sharpener, but I use it so often. I forget I have to empty it. All right, let me make sure I don't have anything on here. And I'm gonna jump right on in. So I'm gonna be really purposeful for these next few steps. I'm gonna make sure that my line quality is consistent. And I'm really staying in my shapes that I've created. And since that solvent is still a little active, it's not fully dried yet, I'm getting a really nice deep layer of this color. Got a little curve in her pinky there. I'm going to crisp up the edge of her hand as it reaches toward her Squidward nose. And then I'll bring this shadow on the bridge of her nose over. Now this is the area where it's not super dark, but it gets a little darker. I'm going to do a light dusting of this color over that area. Same with the bridge of her nose. We've got that really nice shadow that cuts across the top there. I'm now going to go into her eye. I kind of lost what's going on in here, so I definitely want to crisp up that area. And this shadow blends into the one over her nose. I want to maintain those really subtle shifts in the shadows I created down here. So I'm going to start with those super dark areas, make sure I block those in first, and then I'll slowly go in and layer in those kind of in between areas. Trying to bring out this weird hair squiggle. I should probably call it a curl. That's probably what it's actually called. If you know me, I'm not great with words, but the instruction is there. Gonna lightly blend this into the edge of her kind of eyebrow bone going on here. And then continue that same value into the eye. And I love this shadow shape where it kind of curves underneath her curl and then creates this interesting curve. And now that I'm layering in these dark areas, I can really tell how my darks are going to be, how dark they're going to get, and I can adjust from there. I find that to be really helpful. Now again, this was an area I wanted to be careful with because it does blend together. I wanted her chin to be just slightly lighter than what was going on underneath. So let me add that really dark value under her chin. And bring it all the way up to her curl. And since I've darkened this value, I will definitely have to darken this gradation here from the snow shadow I created. But that's just something I have to keep in mind for a little bit later in my process. And somehow this is darker on top. And then this shape under here gets really dark under this curl.
Michaela.
Yes.
Can you tell us what shade you're using right now?
Of course. This is number 28. It's kind of like a deep royal blue.
Thank you.
Yeah. I definitely lost what's happening in here, so I'm going to bring that back. And then I have another weird curl shape up here I want to bring back out. This is mostly dark under that little snow patch. And then there's just a slight curl right there. That's slightly lighter than everything else. And now that I have that and this curl blocked in, all of this is going to be really dark. This is pretty dark too, but not as dark as everything else. It does get a little bit of a shadow underneath her headband. I think that's what that is going on. And then this curl gets darker down at the bottom and gets lighter once it hits the light. I want to make sure I add this to the rest of her face here. Did we have any names, by the way? I feel like she feels like a Norma, but
The only one we got was Wednesday, as in Wednesday's child is full of woe.
oh, I like that. Okay, it's Wednesday. I like Wednesday. All right, I want to make sure her chin stays that same value. I'm going to add a little bit more in there. And this feels a little too light, so I'm going to darken up a little bit of it. when I squint my eyes, the center of her cheek gets darker, so I'm just going to blend in the center of her cheek here, just until you can barely see that definition of a shape I created. Now those little indents in her forehead, I want to make sure I add those in really quickly. I'm going to start squiggling in just little areas of interest because it's not a perfect layer of color. Maybe I'll just do a quick hatch mark here and there to create a little bit of variation. This is not going to be like a human, like smooth skin figure. This is a stone sculpture, and I want to make sure that I add things to it that make that stand out, that make that apparent. So I'll add like a cut or a chip here and there, maybe just a dirty area. Make her feel a little bit more sculpture-like. Now, one thing I want to make sure I do to make this watch look like it's on her wrist here is I want to create just the tiniest indentation to show that the bracelet of this watch is coming out just a touch further than her wrist. So it's very subtle, but like looking up close, you'll be able to tell that it's sitting and wrapping around her wrist and less so ending right where her wrist is ending. Those are things you gotta kind of keep an eye on when you're creating your own reference image, because that watch did not originally exist on her wrist. I added it with Photoshop. So I want to make sure that even though it didn't exist in the reference photo, I need to do things to make it look like it was there on purpose. So it's subtle things like that. Now this is a little bit in shadow. And there's kind of like a line. I'm assuming that's the muscle in her hand. Gets a little shaded under here. And then her pinky nail is so strange. Got shadows around everything but the line where I want to draw, outlining the nail. And then that knuckle, this weird dark color kind of wraps around where that knuckle is and gets a little bit darker. Bring that shadow out a little bit. This is where that really dark splotch is. I'm gonna scribble that in. Anywhere there's something that's not a straight line, I like to get in with like a scribbly line so it feels less sketchy, if that makes sense. In the terms of drawing, not, you know what I mean. And that way it also feels more like a, what am I trying to say here? Feels less like a scratch or a line and more like a valued shape within the drawing. Now this is a really fun shadow here. I want to make sure I add this in and bring it back. Goes up under here, and then it goes straight up. There's a little bit of an indentation where it hits the headband, and then it keeps going. and wraps around under the curl of her hair here. And then it goes further up with the curl. I just like creating these fun outlines for my dark shapes. It's one of my favorite things. This goes down to in between these fingers. Looks kind of like a weird bird. I'm just going to go ahead and fill this in to the same value as my lines. And then I'll soften these edges where it's kind of receding into shadow. Create those nice squiggly marks on the side of her finger. Now this is another weird area. This is where the nubbin is in her fingers. And kind of make it feel purposeful. Make it make sense. And then I have another super dark shadow up here. Make sure I add just the tiniest curve at the top here because that is another finger descending into shadow. That's going to be the only edge I really outline because the rest of this is really soft. It's up against snow, so I'm going to kind of squiggle it into place. All right. Get this edge in. And now I'm going to focus on the hair and this headband. Now it gets really dark as it descends into space. And then there's a really distinct line right about here where it turns into light. Same thing with right here. I really like that it's kind of like a little T shape right in the middle of her forehead. That allows me to create the top edge of her headband, as well as this interesting dark crease underneath her headband here. I'm going to start squinting my eyes and getting those subtle variations of shadow and irregularity. I'm going to soften this edge too where it goes into this shadow here. Again, we noticed that this was a little bit darker of a teal. I'm going to bring back this line as well because it gets really like a thick shadow right around here. All right, let's start bringing out that hair. I definitely lost a little bit of what I had going on here, so this is going to be where I look back and forth from my drawing to my reference and bring back what might have been lost. I think I'm also going to start using this acetate to protect my drawing as I work. So I'm just going to lay it over. Thankfully it's clear so I can see through it, but that way I'm not resting my hand on my artwork and moving around pigments I don't want to move. There we go. And there's a really nice shadow right under her hair here. I want to make sure I bring that out. Now I don't have to go through and use the same dark color for this entire step, but I really like that it unifies everything when I use the same color for shadows. I can always adjust it as I go, but I like having whatever color I grab in my hand for as long as I can, just to make sure I can get it in all the places it needs to go, because I will forget. I will forget what I'm doing. I'll be like, oh, I have to go back. But the longer I have it in my hand, the more likely I'm able to notice if I miss something. It's kind of like a stark line here where the shadows start on the right side of her hair. And it gets really dark in this area underneath the snow. I'm losing my point to my pencil a little bit, so my line work is getting a little softer. Doesn't necessarily bother me yet, but I'm gonna have to sharpen my pencil again. Make sure I get those shadows under the snow here. Okay. That's feeling good. Let me make sure I continue this dark shadow down here, and then I'll get into those fun colors. Whenever I do a large area of color, that's definitely where I try to maintain the similar line stroke. So like in this huge area, I want to fill it in completely with this blue. I'm going through the entire area with light pressure, going at the same angle. Now my pressure changed just a little bit so I can see a line there. I'm just going to make sure I go back through and blend that out. Another thing I did when I was doing that is some of my lines went across my shadow line, which I don't hate because some of my marks move across that line. But I might lighten them a little bit with my electric eraser. Eraser? What did I just say? Okay. And make sure that line is still visible. So I can allow that to go across because I was going to add a little bit of texture there anyway. But I just want to make sure it's a little bit lighter so it looks like it's descending into light. Let me clean off my eraser just a touch. There we go. Let me make sure I add that dark edge behind the arm there, blend it into the value I created. Do a little bit of cross hatching where I feel like I need a deeper gradation in this area. And also some interesting things happening within the shadows. So I want to make sure I add some of that distinction as well. This is where I'm squinting my eyes and scribbling wherever I see a little something going on. Moving my pencil quickly for this step. All right. Again, I want my eye to be moving throughout the piece, so even though I'm focusing mostly on the center here, I'm going to bring some of this blue down here. There's some shadow in here. Again, I'm doing those scribbly lines right along the edge for those soft snow shadows. If they look too stark, I'll just go in with a really soft blend. All right. This might be a good time to start switching over to another color. Get some of this blocked in. All right. So now I'm going to go into my greens again. I really want to make sure those really come out, especially now that I put in that kind of royal looking blue. So I'm going to go back to this green here, number 98. And anywhere I put that blue, I'm just going to put a light layer of this on here so it feels more teal and less blue. And this is super quick because I'm not too worried about the line work. You're not really going to see it. I'm just doing a light dusting of this through that dark blue. Especially up in here and for those transition areas. Make sure I get that nose Squidward colored. All right, now I can go into those browns. I really enjoy those browns and I want to bring those out a lot more. So I have two browns here that I can jump between. I have number 20 and number 19. They're going to be very similar, one slightly darker than the other. So I'm going to start with the lighter one, and anywhere I need to push it even further, so those kind of warm shadows, I'm going to go in with that darker brown. Give it a quick sharpen. I'm going to jump right on in. So I'm starting with those dark shadows. Anywhere I need them to be a different temperature. There's even some shapes that I haven't been able to bring out because I wanted to wait for the browns. And a nice naturalistic black, because I don't use black in my colored pencils, is blending a deep blue with a dark brown. So anywhere that looks like it's almost completely black, I'll probably go in with both of those colors to really make sure that contrast is there. So like on this interesting shape she has on her chest, definitely darkening that up with this color. Same with these weird shapes happening and all of this darkness under her chin. and down along her arm. Again, with this shape for her eye, I'll probably go in with the darker brown for a lot of these areas, just because this one feels a little too red. But since I started, I'm going to keep it uniform, add it in all those areas, and I'll just make sure to add that other brown in there as well. Darken this whole area back here. And then up here is where you really start to see that brown. So I'm definitely going to start pressing down a little bit harder as I add it on top of the blue up here, so that the brown feels more prominent than the blue. At least up here, because that's definitely where that really nice rusty brown is coming from. So I'm definitely turning it a little bit more brown than blue in that area. And this gets pretty dark up in here, even though it's different color. I'm gonna start streaking some more of this into her hair here. And then I'll just kind of dust it through all the way, since it is mostly brown in that area. Now, since there is some of that nice green patina in her hair, I'll probably go through with the electric eraser to pull that back and jump back in with that nice green. All right, this is mostly brown. It goes all the way down into her finger here. Same with here. It was mostly that yellow ochre I placed in this area, but I definitely want to deepen it just a touch with this deeper brown. Same with this area. Feels a little too blue, so I'm going to neutralize it with some of this brown. Same with this area here. And down here. All right, and I'm going to switch over to that other brown here and really push those shadows into darkness. Oh, wrong tool. I want my sharpener. All right. So now I'm just focusing on those black areas where it's almost completely black, and I'm going to press down with this darker brown. It's also more of a neutral brown, so I'm not too worried about it changing the temperature of my shadows. And it gets really dark over here on her other temple and underneath the little mystery nubbin. I feel like this dark shadow where her eye is really important, but leaving it on its own, it feels very strange that it's just like a small black dot where her eye is. So I do think that blending it into the shadow is very important. I'll probably just lightly dust this over the entire cheek again. And really darken that shadow under the chin. Same with over here. Okay. So that's feeling pretty good. I feel like I got my contrast down. I'm gonna pop in any other final details on her face and like her body. Make sure I have everything that I need. I'm probably gonna push this green on her hand a little bit further. So I'm just slightly dusting this over this entire area because I just really enjoy that green. And even though it's not happening in the photo, I want it to happen in my art. So I'm gonna push that quite a bit. I really enjoy that. Okay. I was missing some of that patina in her hair. So I'm going to go in with that electric eraser. Again, I'm going to clean it off on my taped edges here. And I'm going to go in and follow those lines on her curls and erase what I can in that area. And then just a little bit right here. So now that I've done that, I'm just going to layer in some of this green that I've been putting down. So it really pops out right there. All right, so I need to focus on the snow and her bracelets. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. I'm not gonna spend too much time on this because my main focus was working on my lovely figure here. But I'm gonna start popping in those colors that I want in my watch and in my beaded bracelet. Now I think for the bracelet, I'm gonna go for a brown, but like a neutralized brown. So I'm gonna add some of this yellow in the beaded bracelet as well. And since this is so tiny, I just want the hint of something going on there, that it's not natural. So let me get the crispy edges of this back. And since it's metallic, I'm very thankful that the lighting on this reference for the watch was very similar to the lighting on my lady here. Now, if you are doing something like this, try to keep that in mind. Lighting is going to be very important when you're creating your own reference. You want to make sure it makes sense. Unless you're going for surrealism, then just lean into whatever you feel like you want to do. I love surrealism for that exact reason. And since it's also so tiny, I don't need to worry about all the numbers and the lines for the arms on the clock there. I just want to hint at what it is. I don't need to be too worried about the details. Once you can tell what it is, I've reached the point of finalization in that point. And I'm just very quickly adding in those stark contrasty values so it looks like it's metallic. There's very little shadow on this side. Just a couple touches of something going on. And that feels like a watch already. I'm just gonna add a couple different variations of color in there to make it feel like it fits within this image. Since it is metallic, I'm going to reflect some of the color on her into that watch. So I'm just gonna do a light dusting, probably in the center here, where it feels like it's reflecting her on the watch. Or at least letting your eye connect to that part from her. And then I think I want some more of this yellow in here to punch up some of that metallic shape. And then maybe just a touch of green, because I don't want it to be too yellowy. All right, and then maybe just push that value. Let me grab that super dark teal and push those values just a little bit more contrast. And some sharper lines. All right, and that feels pretty good for the watch. I might put like the tiniest hint of something going on in the center, but other than that, I don't think I'm too worried about it. Now I have that beaded bracelet. Like I said, I want it to be a little bit more brown. So I'm gonna go in and start outlining those beads. Kind of lost what was happening here, but I can figure it out, I think. All right. So I'm just gonna fill these in almost completely with these browns. Probably add in some of this dark teal. And then just to finish it off, I'll probably grab that super dark blue I was using for the shadows and create the depth of shadows underneath these beads that separate them. All right, and I think that's good enough for that. Like I said, I don't want to get too into the details since they're so tiny. Oh, that is my alarm to take my nighttime medication. I'm going to focus on the snow, and then I'll leave like a halo of the background so I can show you what I meant about negative space. And I'm going to finish her off for the day. So let's go back in, fix that gradation for the shadow on her shoulder. So like I said, on the left, I want it to kind of blend into that purple, but as it gets further over, I want it to blend into that really deep teal color. All right, that's already feeling a lot better. I want to darken that purple. Let me sharpen that up a little bit. I'll start layering some of this purple in here a little bit more. This is again something I want to be a little bit more purposeful with, since I'm doing a softer blend on this. And what I meant by that, I might as well show you while I'm working on this. I just have a blender stump. Now, these are usually used in graphite and charcoal drawings, but they do work with creating a nice soft blend with colored pencils. And since I kind of like the graininess of the texture I'm getting for the snow, I don't want to get rid of that texture, but I do want to move it around a little bit. So that's what this blending stump is for. And just like the Q-tip, small circular blending, it'll move that pigment around, make it a little bit deeper, but maintain that texture. So that's the second blending method I was mentioning. The third one is going to be one I use all the time. So if you've seen any of my previous videos, I have used this other method. Now I'll show you that in the background while I kind of bring out the rest of her silhouette. So for the background, I used mostly this guy. No surprise, he's almost gone. But let me go ahead and flip him upside down. I can access my drawing a little bit better that way. And I have the graffiti back here. I'm just going to be working around it, and I'm pressing down because I want this to be a different technique. I want it to stand out. I want it to be separate. So let me just create my silhouette so that you guys can kind of see the image come to life. Again, I'm jumping around that graffiti, and I'm being a little rough with how I put this down because I don't want those edges to be crispy. I want them to be a little soft. So I'm moving around the snow that's built up on her. And the rest of her silhouette is going to be where the graffiti is. Let me get the shoulders blocked in where I can. All right. I do always recommend working upside down partway through your drawing, just so you can kind of re-look at things and make sure things are in the correct spot. I kind of like just that line, honestly. That looks kind of cool. Another perk of being an artist, once you do something, even if it's a mistake, you can decide to keep it. If I did that, I would add more of that along the snow down here. So maybe I'll do that, and I'll work a little bit on the background. But over here, I'm just going to outline wherever my snow is in the same line work. There is a little bit of snow kind of allowing her to peek through down here, so I'm going to kind of scribble that in. Same with down here. And then I think it would look really cool in this area where there's a lot of things going on. I bring back my acetate I put away. I think it'd be really cool to just put in those really dark, shadowy lines down here. I can always soften them, blend them into the rest of the drawing if I feel like they're too stark. But I just really loved the line quality up there, so I'm going to add it in some other areas. looking good. Probably go back into the snow a little bit. Just because I want a little bit more color in there. Same thing on this side. I have that really nice shadowy area. It is green because it's probably reflecting the patina into the snow. I might put just a touch in there, or maybe I'll just use more of that yellow ochre to put in that area. Just to stay true a little bit to my original reference. Make sure I get really dark with my purple shadow right up next to her arm here. And then add a little bit more of this purple blending out. All right, and like I said, I really like that pink. So again, I'm gonna dust a lot of pink into the snow. I think it looks really beautiful. It makes it look like the sun is hitting it, and it's a wonderful contrast to that green. Oh, and I forgot the head again. Why didn't you guys remind me? There is a little bit of pink over here, but I do want to keep that right shoulder mostly white because I want it to look like that's the brightest area. Same with the very top of her head, this whole area right here. I want to keep the white of the paper, but everything else, it's going to go pink. Make sure I have a little bit more purple up here where that shadow is. I definitely like the shadows of this purple underneath here. It doesn't exist in my reference photo, but I'm definitely going to add it just because I really enjoy this purple everywhere. All right. Let's do another soft blend of the snow, and then we'll move on to that background. And I still have some of this blue from earlier. I'm going to kind of hint at some more shadows in here and just kind of draw with it a little bit. Maybe I'll even extend my shadow over here with the same thing. All right, I did get a little carried away up here, so I'm just going to use a kneaded eraser. didn't pick up anywhere I felt like I might have done a bit too much. All right, that feels good. Now I'm going to work on the background, and that will finish my drawing for the evening. I am going to flip her upside down for this part so I can have easier access. I'm also going to flip over my reference photo. Now I love this graffiti. I'm going to start with the graffiti and then work around it, cutting in with that background color again. So for this, I really like this one because it has a nice gradation from like the punchy bright green in her hand to the teal like in her forehead, and it matches super well. So I'm going to start with the same colors. Make sure I have my acetate here. Oh, I definitely put my pencil down and scratched along my drawing. That's okay. I have my handy dandy magic eraser. I like to pick up my shavings with my kneaded eraser, even though I have my little doop. It's just whatever my hand gets to first, I guess. Okay, so starting with the same colors, going to start by reestablishing my outline. Now, what's fun about graffiti is you can see the streaks of the mark making in this image. So I'm working along those lines as I fill it in. I'm just streaking it in, following that line work. And then for those punchy areas, I have that limey green again, number 63. I'm just slightly brushing that in on those areas. A little bit on the tail of the M here. Going to have my base color be this blue I had on her, number 61. Gonna fill in this entire shape with this color as a unifier. And then I will show you my third method for blending. Now, the third method is going to be using a colorless blender. Now, there are different options. There are markers, I believe, filled with something like solvent that will help you blend that way. This is a Cezanne colorless blender that goes with these Cezanne colored pencil sets. If you got the set of 120, these are sold separately. There are, I believe, packs where you can get them together in a bundle. But these are basically just the binder of a colored pencil without any pigment, so you can move around the color. So I just like to kind of burnish these colors together. And all of these ways of blending look a little bit different, so I feel like if you're utilizing all three, and you utilize them on different areas of your piece, you're going to create a really nice separation. I do like to start a little softer just so I can make sure that the way I'm burnishing it looks nice. And then I'll go in and I'll give it a little bit more pressure. And then from there, I'm going to carve around this shape with that background color and fill it in. But I wanted to give this time for any final questions. I'm going to work slowly on the background. And then once we feel like we're out of questions, we're going to call it an evening. So I'm going to do the same thing I was doing, where I'm reestablishing my drawing here. I might fix up some of my line work on my M. I don't want to be too detailed with the background. I want it to be really soft, so it feels like it's further back in space. So again, adding those lines, following the strokes in the spray paint. Adding a bit of this punchy green. And then unifying with that blue. Gonna go ahead and blend those together again. Where did I don't know where I put my other color splendor. And blend those colors together. Not too worried about the edges because like I said, I'm going to cut in with that background color. And that will fix up any mistakes that might have gotten out of the lines. And this is going to be where I press down and fill in that background completely. Now if I wanted to create more separation, I did only use the solvent blending on the first layer of the figure. I could do that again if I wanted to. If I wanted to keep it really smooth, I would want to be very careful with my color selection just to make sure that if I have a really strong color, it's not going to overwhelm the composition once I blend it. Get that tiny little cutout in the A. All right. But it feels like I've covered everything in this drawing. I really hope that you enjoyed this lesson tonight and that if you followed along, that you share with us your work. Don't forget, if you enjoyed like, share, subscribe, all those fun things. And if you missed anything, don't be afraid to go back through and rewatch at any point. We're going to be on YouTube forever. If you are following along, like I said, post and tag us at JerrysArtarama, as well as our class code for today, which is JLW2. And join us next month. We will be here again on April 2nd with Emmy, who's going to be going over watercolor for beginners. That's going to be super fun, especially if you're new to watercolor, or even if you're already used to watercolor, maybe you'll learn something different. And if you have any workshop requests or ideas, please put that in the comments. We would love to hear it. But other than that, we'll see you next time. Thank you guys for being here.